shipping's going to go to China for them too, because they sell all over the world.
There's tariffs in China too.
No, but if you're shipping from China directly to here, there's no tariff. They sell to other countries around the world, so instead of exporting from their factories, which is like I don't know, 50 years, but it's very terrible.
Okay. All right. So Chaf Gimel, Tashlum Chov Shel Ishto, paying your wife's debts. So this we started this Shaila, right? Okay. So we just asked the question. We didn't really answer the question. Isha Nesua Hamit Aseket b'mamon b'fnei atzma. A woman deals privately with her own bank account. V'livta ma'ot stam ve'in biyadalach zirachov. So she borrows cash without any stipulation that her husband is a co-signer, and she doesn't now have the ability to pay back the debt. Does the husband have an obligation to pay back her debt? In other words, is there an implicit co-signer? Is the husband an implicit co-signer, or do we say that no, he can say it's my wife's debt?
It has to come from her, had come from their joint account, and he had no idea.
Well, if it comes from the joint, so then he's on the hook, right? Isn't that?
He had nothing to do with it. Or what's the difference where the money came from? It's who makes the deal.
Well, it depends if there was a lien on their bank account. So then,
But if are you seeing from here that from the question that there was a lien and it was just a deal that she did on her own?
Well, if she's taking from her husband's funds, if I guess, if it's a joint bank account, in a sense, she's taking from her husband's funds and using that money without her husband's permission, without her husband's knowledge. Right.
And then it makes a deal with somebody.
And she wouldn't consult with you? You'd have the burden of proof to demonstrate that she was acting independently of you, I would think. You'd have to demonstrate that.
She buys things without telling me.
Right, but you don't mind. You tell her whatever you want, honey. You just go ahead.
That's anything.
Good husband.
How much was that?
Yeah, just even asking the question sometimes becomes an offense. Okay, anyway. Isha nesua hamit aseket b'mamon b'tzura atzma'it v'livta ma'ot stam. If a woman deals independently with finances, she could have her own bank account that she got from her family, or she made it on her own, and she borrows money without any stipulation of her husband being a co-signer. Ein habal chayiv l'shalim v'im livta ein habal chayiv l'shalim. The husband has no financial liability. V'im livta yachad im baila dinam kishnayim shalavu me'echad shekol echad mehem mitchayiv l'shalim kol hachov. And if she ends up borrowing together with her husband, even if she does it without telling her husband, but if it's done with their joint account, so then it's implicit that the husband is giving his permission. So then it's as if two people borrowed from one lender. Each one, what's the legal term? Severally and individually, jointly and severally, right? They're jointly and severally liable, meaning each one owes the full amount. Okay, chatzi chov midin loive v'chatzi midin arev. Half of the debt is because each one of them is a borrower, and half the debt, in other words, each one, if they borrow $100, each one owes 50 as being a borrower, and the other 50 they're a cosigner. V'chatzi midin arev. And therefore, the way it works normally is that when two people borrow, the lender, when he wants to collect his debt, asks each one to pay back half. And if only one has the means to pay back half, and the other one defaults, he can go to the other party, the original party that he collected half from, and say, now give me the other half. V'lochein, and therefore, kisha ha'isha ein la mima l'shalem, when a woman doesn't have the means to pay back the debt, if they jointly borrowed, meaning that it was with her husband's either explicit or implicit consent, yochol ligvos hamal ve'eskol hachov min habal, chetzio midin loiva v'chetzio midin arif. The lender can collect the entire amount from the husband. Like if he sees the guy in shul and he says, hey, it's been a week since the loan was due. Your wife borrowed this money. Where is it? He can't say, Hak mirnish the chinik. I just want to come and daven in peace. No, your wife lent me the money. She borrowed the money from me. You knew about it. It was from your joint account. You knew about it. So therefore, you're as much on the hook as she is. Okay, so is that clear? Okay, fine. Next shaila. Bale chanuyot shenotnim motzarim bahakafa v'roshmim osam al pinkasam o shekona b'check dachui v'chol kayotze bazeh. So let's say a storekeeper sells items on credit, and he writes down each customer who purchases on credit, which is a very common thing in Israel. Or the seller sells items using post-dated checks. That's what a check dachui means. It means a post-dated check. Ha'im hamocher mekayim bazeh mitzvahs halva. Is this considered a fulfillment of the mitzvah of lending money to your fellow Jew? There's no ramification here. He just wants to know, do I get a mitzvah or not by owning a makolet and selling goods on credit? So the the answer is, hamocher bahakafa o shekona b'chek dachui o shemocher davar ba'ashrai, eino mekayim bazeh mitzvahs halva. He says, the answer is no. You're not fulfilling the mitzvah of lending people money. However, avol yesh bazeh mishum gemilus chasadim. But you are fulfilling a mitzvah of gemilus chasadim. You're doing an act of chesed. Now, where does this come from? I guess the answer is because it's more of a transaction than it is you're extending credit to people, but you're doing it in a transaction form, not in a loan form. And that's why I guess he doesn't view it as a real loan. Are you doing an act of chesed? There's no question. You're doing an act of chesed. Is it your business model? Yeah, but sometimes a person's business model could be considered chesed. Yeah.
But when I think of beyond just chesed is, so for example, let's say I have a Jewish store that I do business with. Now, every store you establish a credit line of how much you will give them credit, right? So sometimes some people you'll push it up farther, especially with somebody I have a relationship with, a yid that I have a relationship with, and I'll put it higher, and it goes beyond that sometimes, and I have, instead of just calling them because they're within their terms of days, but they're beyond their credit limit. So would that just be chesed, or would that be like a loan sort of?
Yeah. Well, it's not a loan. I think but it is a chesed. You're still doing chesed. It's not a loan. You're not lending them money. You're lending. You're selling them goods, but allowing them to pay you for those goods at a later date. So you are doing. It's considered an act of kindness.
But I'm putting myself more in the book now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why it's chesed. Yeah.
You're taking a risk.
Yeah.
Is it a loan?
What?
A loan?
And if they don't pay you back, then at that point, does it turn into an act of
And look,
you're not getting it back.
I don't know what happens in Shamayim, but let's say the person defaults. Do you have, let's say, is it a secured kind of transaction? Like, can you collect from there?
Or Marv.
1-800-MARV.
Yeah, it's an unsecured debt.
It's an unsecured.
You have to sue on the line of credit.
That's a pain.
Well, you got to take him to Beis Din first.
This will go.
What do you mean you mean sometimes a person will just refuse? Has that ever happened to you when you've offered someone to go to Beis Din?
I mean, before I was aware of, my obligation to go to Bay State first, I had situations I just didn't know about. Now I know about it, so I haven't had the situation.
Well, how about if you know about it and you don't want to go?
When the other party refuses,
Go to civil court.
well, you still have to send them a hazmana first. And then the Beis Din will tell you, basically, this person's refusing, so you can take them to civil court. But you have to go through the motions.
But in theory, like, you've made appointment based in, live there a couple days, a month, 2 years, like, how long will it take you?
Beis Din usually sends 3 hazmanas, 3 summons. And then after that point, if the person is recalcitrant and they don't, and they refuse to, they just blow off the Beis Din will give you the permission to go ahead and do whatever you need to do.
Is it upon the obligation of the person who needs to collect money to take it to Bay State? Because I have a situation right now that Martin knows about where there's a lawyer coming with this crazy bill to us, which we don't agree with, and now he wants to go to mediation. So, but which we're fine with doing something like that, but should really this be going to Bay State before it goes to mediation?
Isn't mediation, that's not a din Torah.
Yeah, the mediation would be okay, because the whole point of mediation is to avoid the court. So if you're doing some kind of mediation, I don't think you need to go to Beis Din. Because by definition, and that's the difference between mediation and arbitration. Arbitration is basically going to a court. It's just that it's going to an informal court instead of a formal court. And so Beis Din is really arbitration. So if you have an option, you should go to a Beis Din arbitration instead of some other arbitration. But there are times when you can just say, let's just go to one person and have him make a decision who is owed the money. And that too could, I think you're within your rights to avoid Beis Din and just go to a one-person arbitrator and just sign off. I think so. I really have to double check that.
Just like binding arbitration would be good?
Yeah. Well, no, well, you're going to mediation, not arbitration.
Is it
Mediation.
Mediation?
But is
No,
it-
no decision-making power, just try to negotiate.
Gotcha. So it's not
Yeah.
binding.
Can't you go to mediation, say whatever the mediator says, you both agree, you sign off on it,
Yeah,
and that's
usually,
done?
yeah, usually the mediator, it's not set up that way. Mediator's just an informal peacemaker and, tries to negotiate, but one party doesn't want to settle, it's no deal. Can't impose it.
Arbitration is.
Arbitration
Doesn't
is
say sign
usually
off.
final and binding.
In a court of law, it's binding in a court of law.
Yeah, you take the award, the arbitration award or Beis award or whatever and file it with the court.
This court say they both
And
signed
the
off,
court
they
says
agree.
it's tantamount to a court decision, judgment.
So if he doesn't agree with the mediation, then even though I'm the one who owes the money, should I be just telling him that we should be going to Bay State, or is it up upon him to tell me that?
If you want your money, you have to.
He's the one who needs to get paid, not me. I'm the one who owes to pay the money.
Can a defendant take someone to bait?
Sometimes you can,
Was it
Yeah.
a counter?
you can ask the Beis Din to initiate a process. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay, let's go on. She'ela mishalava mikama anashim ve'en lo lahachzir lahem hachov. A person borrowed from a number of people, and he doesn't have the ability to pay back the debt. Ha'im yesh mitzvah lahalvoto kidei shiachzir es chova. Is there a mitzvah to lend him money so that he can borrow from Peter to pay Paul? Right? Essentially, a guy is trying to consolidate his debt. So he wants to borrow a large sum from Ruvain so he can pay back Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, etc. Oh, shal yedei sheyalvelo sikum gadol lo yihya mamash lahachzir In Cain, adif shelo yalvelo. Or the counter argument is that, do I have a mitzvah to lend him money so that he can pay back all of his creditors? Or could I make the argument by lending him this large sum, he's not going to be able to ever pay it back in its entirety, and therefore it's better if I don't lend it to him. Okay, so I'm not really sure why this is a question. Like, if you know the guy's not going to be able to pay it back, then
Already you don't have.
yeah, if you know he's not going to pay it back, you don't have a mitzvah to lend him money. So anyway, let's see what he says. Lo v'shechayev lekama malvim ein mitzvah lahalvoso k'shahasikum hu gadol. If a person has multiple debts to multiple creditors, there's no mitzvah to lend him the money so that he can consolidate his debt into one debt to you. V'chein kishayodim shahaloi v'lokeach halva v'yotzi osa shelo letzorech. And furthermore, when you know that a person's going to borrow money, spend it on things that are, let's say, gratuitous or not directed towards making himself solvent, and you know he's not going to act responsibly and he's not going to be able to pay back the debt. Ein lahalvos la'adam kazeh. You should not lend money to that kind of person. When you know that you're going to have to oppress him and put pressure on him to pay back the debt. Like, and there you'll violate the mitzvah of do not be an oppressor to a debtor. In other words, assess the situation fairly and don't go into it blindly. If you know the guy's a credit risk, don't lend him money. However, if you feel the guy is honest, but you know it's going to take him a while to pay it off, and he'll only be able to pay it off in small installments over the course of months or possibly even years, and you can withstand that kind of, you have the time to be able to wait, then it is a mitzvah to lend him money. In other words, there's a mitzvah to lend someone money even when you know it's going to be difficult for him to pay back the loan, and it'll come over the course of a large amount of time. If you have the means to do so, then there's still a mitzvah, provided that you know the guy's not a credit risk, right? But if you already know someone has a checkered past, and he comes across as really sincere and he plays the violin and all that stuff, but you know that in the end of the day, he's probably not going to deliver, then there's no mitzvah to lend that person money. None whatsoever. You can use your tzedakah money to give him tzedakah, but then you should.
The original intent was not to, but you can turn it into a meiser.
Sometimes you can. Now, there are situations also where a person says, I want to take a loan from you, but you know he's never going to be able to rub two nickels together. So sometimes you can say, okay, I'll lend you the money just to help him save face, because he doesn't want to ask for charity. So sometimes you could say, okay, sure, I'll be happy to lend you the money. When do you think you can pay it back? Fine, don't worry about it. You'll pay me back when you can. If you have in mind at that time that you know the guy's never going to pay it back or he's unlikely to pay it back, then fine. You can call it a loan, but have in mind that it's a mitzvah of tzedakah, just out of adding to the chesed of giving the guy back his dignity that he's borrowed the money.
But can you, Mitch, 6 months later, when you realize you're never gonna see this money, say, you know what?
Yeah, you could, but I'm saying even more. I'm saying that even at the time of the loan, you could call it a loan, even though you know it's meiser. Yeah.
Rabbi, is there any difference in the chesed if you're giving the loan to the Jew or to a goy?
Sure, of course.
Is there any benefit for the goy giving a loan to a goy? Is there any sort of spiritual?
Do you get a mitzvah from it?
Yeah.
It could be if the goy is an extremely benevolent person and is a big supporter of the Jewish people, and sometimes there is a mitzvah if a Gentile is a righteous Gentile. Yeah, sometimes there is. It could be that it's not as great of a mitzvah as lending a Jew, because the Torah specifically says that if your brother is indigent, you should try to support him. Whereas I don't have the same level of mitzvah, but if he's a righteous Gentile and you feel that you could help him and make a Kiddush Hashem and so forth and so on, so then yeah, there's a mitzvah there as well.
How far does Kiddush Hashem go? So, you know, you have a choice, obviously you help your fellows, right?
Well, if
Kiddush Hashem could be monstrous for the Jewish community, it could be huge.
right, so you have to assess, you have to weigh it out, yeah.
Does the Gemach go through this,
What do you mean, does a gemach go through this?
go through these considerations when lending money to somebody?
You secure all the.
Do their due diligence? Make
A
sure the
gemach,
person comes back.
sure, gemach usually requires a cosigner. If a, yeah. Gemachs usually require cosigners. Yeah. Because, and remember, the gemach, a gemach is set up in order to do chesed. That's why it's called gemach, which stands for gemilos chesed. They're set up to do chesed. However, they want to do chesed responsibly, right? So they don't want to close their doors on their gemach operation just because they lend money to a guy who's a bad credit risk, right? So there's nothing wrong with that, but they are doing the chesed, and they have every right to turn someone down because they can say, you have no security, you have no cosigner, there's no way for us to know if we'll ever see you again, and therefore we don't have to lend you the money. Everyone has that option. That you essentially, the halacha does not require you to impoverish yourself in order to help someone else out, and the halacha does not require you to extend someone a loan when you know that they're a bad credit risk. That's essentially what we're learning from all of this. Okay. Now, matzinu b'gemara shenosa'at v'notenet be'inyan orev kablan v'orev stam v'yesh lishol ma hevdel bein orev kablan v'orev stam. There are two types of guarantors that are discussed by the Gemara. The one term is just a regular orev, and the other one is called an orev kablan. The question is, what's the difference between the two types of guarantor? Now, we've spoken about this before. And there's actually three types of orev that he's not getting into the third type because it's very uncommon. But essentially, the three types of orev are regular guarantor, is Reuven acts as a guarantor for Shimon, who is the debtor. That means that if Shimon defaults on the loan, the creditor can go to Reuven and say, I can't get the money out of Shimon, you, Reuven, have to cover for him. Okay, that's the standard form of guarantor. And Orev Kablan is where the arrangement is so tight with the creditor that the creditor basically stipulates in the loan documents, I can go to either Shimon or Reuven to collect the loan. I don't have to first go to Shimon and exhaust all efforts before going to Reuven. What would that be called in a secular law?
Basically a co-borrow.
A co-borrower.
It's the same level of liability, right?
Right.
You have to wait for the other to default and go
Yeah.
direct. Bank guarantees are like that these days too. The bank has the choice to go after anyone at any time, despite the late.
Right. Even though that co-borrower really never borrowed the money or even touched the money.
Correct.
Right. So that's what an Orev Kablan is.
So it's direct liability.
Yeah, direct liability. And then there's a third level where the creditor can stipulate, I can dafka go to the guarantor first, right? Like I never even want to go to the debtor, and that's the third level. But he's not going to get into that. Okay, so
You had the question before where you had multiple lenders. And the borrower only has, let's say, X amount of money to give back at the time.
right.
So he likes one guy and one guy is not a nice guy or whatever who lent, like, can he, if it's $1,000 and he has to give 250 to four guys, can he give 500 for one guy? And
He hasn't discussed that yet, but we did see that in the It wasn't called Makor Baruch. What was it called? It was called the something Baruch, but the Baruch Omer. Yeah, we saw when you owe, let's say, two different workers money, and you can only pay one. We saw it's a big machlokas essentially. Should you pay each one half, or do you pay one the full amount, whichever one you feel you'd like to, and the other
Whoever
one?
needs it more.
Well, there might be multiple different ways of reasons, to work that out. So hopefully he'll get to that at some point. I hope that that's something he covers. Okay, so here the question is, what's the difference between a regular Ariv and an Ariv Kablan? So Ariv Kablan akavana, Ariv shemakabel alatzma tachov legamre ki'ilu hu lava min halog malva. That an Ariv Kablan is a person who essentially makes himself into a co-borrower. It's as if I borrowed the money together with the debtor. Ve'ein kan loiva. V'yachol hamalva litvo lihipar mimenu tchila im yirtze, ve'afal pi sheyesh nechasim l'lova. And therefore, the creditor can go to the Ariv Kablan even first, even if the guy who borrowed the money has the means to pay it back, but it's more convenient for me to go to the guarantor. That's what an Ariv Kablan is, that you basically sign off as if you're a borrower. Biyad hamalva litvo es mi sheyirtze, imze es haloiva o es Ariv Kablan. Basically, it's within the rights of the creditor to go after whichever one he wants. Whereas a regular cosigner, a regular Arev, ein hamal v'yachol litvo es ha'arev techila, ela ad sheyitva es haloiva l'dintora v'yichayevuhu beis. There, he cannot go after the creditor until he actually exhausts all efforts, takes the debtor to beis din, defaults on the loan, the beis din holds him liable and he can't pay it back, then he can go after the Arev. V'im ein l'loiva mimal l'shalem, rak oz yifra min ha'arev yischayv ha'arev b'tashlumin, and only then can he go to the creditor, the cosigner, the Arev, and the cosigner will have to pay. And therefore, until the creditor sues and demands payment from the debtor, he cannot go to the creditor at all. So those are two levels. Those are the two types, and we'll continue in Mirza Hashem tomorrow. Okay, everyone have a